Hello, everyone. Welcome to, for those of you who are here with us today at First Baptist Church in Greensboro, and for those of you who are watching online. We're so glad that you're here as part of the ACAP community and to particularly tonight hear a very important presentation. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I do want to start by talking a little bit about ACAP. ACAP's mission is to be an educational nonprofit organization that offers information, resources, support, and community for those of us who are providing care and support for our aging parents. Through local chapters, monthly programs are offered that address all kinds of important and pertinent issues about aging, family dynamics, and adult-child relationships and providing care. We now have 7 chapters across the United States. In Greensboro, we meet here at First Baptist Church on the 3rd Thursday of every month at 6 o'clock. We're at 1000 West Friendly Avenue in Greensboro. We also are streaming virtually on Facebook, and we have a website that I'll tell you about a little bit more at the end of the program. You can visit all or see all of our previous programs by going on the website and linking out to the programs, or go through YouTube. And also we have a whole set of podcasts that are available on these same kinds of important topics. I would like to thank our sponsors for tonight. We have some very strong and wonderful sponsors: Griswold Home Care, Health Team Advantage, Booth Harrington and Johns, and Providence Place. For tonight, we encourage you to interact with us by putting your questions or comments into the chat box on your computers. We have a program tonight that will sort of build on what we talked about last month. Last month, we addressed what it's like to be in a productive and helpful relationship as a child, giving support to their aging parents. We talked about some of the concerns and changes that come up and how we can address them in productive and loving ways. Of course, children-parent relationships can be the primary care provision relationship, but we know lots of other people are involved in that relationship. Friends even, but certainly other family members, aunts, uncles, grandchildren, and most importantly, our own siblings. How we all relate to each other is what we're going to, and how we work together to provide care is what we're going to be talking about tonight. And we are very fortunate to have Risa Hanau with us tonight to take us down this lane. Risa is a clinical and community educator at AuthoriCare Collective. In the 18 years with AuthoriCare, she has served in many roles. She has worked in the hospice field since 1993 and started her career as a hospital social worker at Moses Cone Hospital here in Greensboro. Risa is a sought-after speaker and teacher in the area of end of life and ethics. She's a member of the Cone Health Ethics Committee, and by training, Risa is a licensed clinical social worker and holds a Master's of Social Work from the University of Pennsylvania. We are truly privileged to have Risa here with us tonight. Thank you, Risa.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here and to join you and really be in community with you as the daughter of an 86-year-old mother and the younger sister who lives in town, and I'm the out-of-town daughter. So I certainly, when I heard about this topic, it resonates with me on many, many levels. Certainly professionally, we know that when anybody is nearing the end of life, has a diagnosis, care is required, it raises emotion, it brings people together who may have been otherwise distant. And certainly, while there are many wonderful opportunities, there can be some difficult times together. So my hope for our time is to have really a very open conversation about some of the very typical, although difficult, things that can happen when we are in community with our siblings. Sometimes they are siblings by blood. Sometimes it is through multiple marriages or different family blending situations. But whatever brings us together as siblings or identifying in that way, we know that providing care and having the ability to work together in support of a common goal can create some challenges. So if we go ahead and look at the first slide, this is something that I think many of us can resonate with, which is, the happy family is a myth for many. Now, it would be lovely if we all lived in the world of Hallmark and we all had birds chirping and we had soft music playing and the family sitting peacefully together around a table and everyone being on the same page and all of our pieces fitting together very lovely and complementary. And it is true that there are those opportunities. It is also true that it is a societal aspiration more than it is a reality. And there are many reasons for that. One is if I stop and I think that at age 57, my sister being 59, and we reminisce about something that occurred maybe leading up to Thanksgiving when we were growing up, I don't think she grew up in the same house as I did. We're only 2.5 years apart. We literally grew up down the hall from each other in the same house our entire lives. We lived together when she was in medical school and I was in graduate school. And I don't know who her parents were. And so that's sort of a basic starting point for many of us, which is that while we might have a sibling, we can be very close in age, we can be twins, we still have our own personal filter and experience, memories of our family. It's not surprising or unusual to hear, well, you were dad's favorite and I was mom's favorite. To have a conversation as my sister and I have had over the years, back when my father was still alive, okay, when something happens to dad, then you'll take mom. And when something happens to mom, you'll take dad, right? So it is our reality, and we need to acknowledge that when somebody is aging, when somebody begins to need care, whether it is assistance with their finances, with their physical care, with planning, with dealing with difficult decisions, we're not starting fresh. We are coming to these situations with all of the baggage, the history, the arguments, the stresses, the realities that have been with us throughout our entire family history. So it's very, again, lovely to think that when we hear a devastating diagnosis of dementia or of a cancer or merely of a real functional decline because our parent is, now in their late 80s into their 90s, that we will be able to work with our sibling and be on the same page. But yet, were we on the same page throughout our entire lives? Have we lived in the same community? Have we had the same experiences? Do we have the same values? Do we have the same faith beliefs? Are we socioeconomically in the same place? Are we, the list goes on and on and on. So there is a mythical belief that because we are siblings, somehow we are one. And if I could show you a picture of my sister and tell you about her, people would never assume that we were siblings. Now, in many ways, we're very close. We both have the desire that our mother should be as independent as possible, as long as possible, that she should be able to be comfortable and safe. But what does safe mean? What does comfortable mean? I'm a social worker. She's a pathologist. To her, there's a need to control, lock down, manage. And I say, if she wants to go out without her cane, she understands, she's totally alert and oriented, she can make that decision. And my sister's response is, how can you say something like that? You want her to fall? No, I don't want her to fall. But I also don't want to direct her life and constrain her. So oftentimes when there are difficult moments, it's that bumping up against of what is it that I, Risa, think is acceptable for mom? And then Cheryl has her opinion, my sister, about what's acceptable for mom. But it's really what mom wants. And sometimes we lose that piece of the conversation because we get into it so with our siblings that we forget who is it that we are actually having the conflict over, and where can we keep that parent as a part of the conversation. Now, for all of us, we're not in a situation where our parent right now is able to express themselves. Some of us have parents that are struggling with dementia or other illnesses that make them lose the capacity to say, this is what I want, or to be able to understand risk that they are taking. We hope, though, that we've had some conversation beforehand. And I will encourage anyone who has a parent that is still in a position to be able to express themselves, to assert their wishes, to have conversation when you can have conversation. Let your parent be the driver to the extent that they are able, because then it lets me say, Cheryl, mom told us that this is what she wanted. Let's do our best to try to respect it. So when we think about the concept of the happy family can begin with conversation. Now, not every family has a history of having conversation, right? How many families, have sat around throughout your, lifetime discussing really difficult, challenging things? I see Kevin is saying, not my family, right? So if we haven't learned to use those muscles, it's really hard to start to develop them when we're 57, when my mom's 86. And so we need to, on one level, give ourselves a break. We need to think about if we were a family that maybe kept secrets. We were a family that the children were to be seen and not heard. You didn't need to know about the finances. We don't need to talk about, sad things, hard things. I didn't go to a funeral until my grandfather died when I was 13. My parents had never allowed me. I didn't understand. I had never been exposed to death. So we need to reflect on what is our history and help that understand what is happening now. Use that knowledge. Were you a family that came together and perhaps when your grandparents were aging, did you know what was going on? Did you go and visit them? Did you see them decline? Was there open conversation about what was going on? Families tend to repeat patterns. We tend to grow and develop as individuals, but yet there are certain things that are pretty much repetitive if we look generation to generation. So I'm gathering in this room of looking. So Kevin, you guys didn't do a whole lot of talking. Cheryl, not a whole lot of talking. Not a whole lot of talking. I don't know. No, I don't know anybody online, whether anybody's weighing in about how much conversation around hard topics, right? So if I was not exposed to having difficult conversations with my parents, then why would I expect that I could do it with ease now as an adult? And if my sister and I were never given the opportunity to work together in terms of having to create care situations or even understand them, and we live separate lives, and then we get a telephone call. Mom has fallen, right? All of a sudden it's, now we hope that we have some groundwork laid, right? Does mom have a support system around her? Do we have a key to mom's apartment? Do we have power of attorney? Have we had conversation? Have we had, the at least superficial conversation about what somebody's wishes are? So I would challenge each one of us, and I say it for myself, to begin to think about how we can have conversation before crisis, how we can begin to work on not the myth of the perfect, happy family that all fits together, but to be able to say, Mom, I love that you're independent right now. And just in case one day, what is it that you might want? And let's have that conversation on a three-way so that my sister is hearing it at the same time I'm hearing it. Or all 3 siblings, or all 4 siblings, or all 10 siblings. Now, that's often one of the problems that comes in, is that I say to my mother, I think it's great that you're going out to lunch today. And then she'll tell my sister, and I'll get a message, and she'll say, Mom said you didn't think that she should go out to lunch. Why don't you want her to go out to lunch? Right? Well, that's not what I said to Mom. Well, that's what she told me you said. Are you calling her a liar? Right? Now, all of a sudden, it's my sister and I going, but then I start thinking, well, did Mom not hear me? Was I not clear? Is she having some memory problems? I say that to my sister, and she says, she's perfectly fine. It's you who were not, it was you. You're lying. You didn't tell her that, right? So, which is kind of our pattern, right? It's very familiar. Many of us have roles. And so when we think about dynamics, when we think about siblings, it's complicated. Life is complicated. Before coming tonight, I said to someone, the only time that family sibling dynamics are not complicated are if you're an only child. Now, if you're an only child, it's got its issues also. But I've had many friends who say, "Oh, that would be so much easier if I was an only child." The person I said it to tonight is an only child. And she said, oh, but if only I had somebody to partner with, only if I had someone to, really talk about how hard this was. And I was like, yeah, right. Call a friend, because it can be hard. So when we think about our childhood, when we think about our growing up, when we think about our patterns, our traditions, we understand that in most situations, we tend to be very repetitive. I remember a gentleman who said to me that his father never told him that he loved him just prior to his death. And I said, did your father ever tell you that he loved you? And he said, no, he never said that. And we had a conversation that, for as much as society leads us to believe that there are these epiphanies and there are these tremendous, coming together, every time somebody becomes ill and nears death, it is not always the case. And far too often, we beat ourselves up that we are not doing it right because there's this, concept that is really not obtainable, but we believe everybody else's family sits around holding hands and singing Kumbaya. But that's just not the case. And so I think we need to be able to give ourselves a little bit of a break. We need to be able to accept the fact that our families were not perfect when we were children. They were not perfect when our parents were younger. And most people become more of who they are as they get older, right? So if our parents were not open with sharing their thoughts, their feelings, their finances, what they thought was their business, it's a very difficult leap for people to be able to change those patterns, for as important as it is, which is why we want to try to do it as soon as possible. And have conversation along the way. Try to make it a normal part of whether it's gatherings, it's birthdays. What do I want for my birthday? I want a conversation, Mom, with you and Cheryl about where it is that you want to continue to live. Is it in Philadelphia or is it in North Carolina? And if you need care, how are we going to figure that out? And who do you want to speak for you? And again, the more that we can do that with as many of us hearing the same thing at the same time, the better. If it is written down, if it's all of us on a Zoom, or it's all of us together, that is better. Because then we don't get what is sometimes known as splitting, where, well, Mom told me this, no, Mom told me that. And that's very hard to deal with. So conversation, joint conversation, remembering that our parent is the one who is really the focus, and try to keep our feelings and our personal wants not front and center, but off to the side and focusing on the parent. And that can be hard. And I acknowledge that. There's also the reality that there tends to be one sibling who carries a lot of the burden, right? Whether it's the sibling who is in town or the sibling who's the responsible one, or fill in the blank. I'm the out-of-town daughter. So I'm the, one who's not terribly helpful. Well, it's also the fact that my mom gravitates towards my sister, and I acknowledge that. And I offer, whether it's to go and stay and be helpful, I offer to be the healthcare power of attorney. I offer to order things on Amazon when she says she wants something. No, your sister will take care of it. Whatever it is, your sister will take care of it. And I've come to learn that my sister manages her finances and my sister is her healthcare power of attorney. And I could feel offended. I could say, well, I'm a social worker and I've worked at hospice for 30 years. But I can also say how lovely it is that we have these arrangements in place and not put my ego into it. And it's hard, right? Because I'm not sure the pathologist should be her healthcare power of attorney. But it's who my mom has selected. And she's done that very, very mindfully, thoughtfully. And in truth, I was my dad's, right? So we need to acknowledge the ability to allow our parents to make choices to the extent that they are able. And then when and if they lose that ability, to try to hearken back to remember what was written down on paper, or remember what was said, and not start saying, well, now we're in charge and this is what I want. If we can always try to speak in the voice of the person, if I can always speak in the voice of my mother, I know deeply what my mother holds to be dear to her. I know what she values. And if I can uphold that, then that is me doing the best that I can, whether my sister makes decisions that might not be the same ones that I make. Because it's not about me in that moment. It's about my mom. And it's hard. I saw a little pop-up. Was there a question or a comment or?
Just a comment from Paulette Rucker. She commented that as children, they were expected to not be in the room when the adults were talking. So
Right.
it's a delay.
Right. And I think that is, a hard habit to break. And there was a study years and years ago by the Reader's Digest, so you can tell how long ago it was, but that, adult children and their parents would rather talk about their sex lives than about end-of-life arrangements. It's hard. It's hard societally, but it also brings up, all of these slights or these feelings that we have. And so if we go to the next slide, I just sort of put down some common behaviors that we often see within families. If you look within a family unit, sometimes it is based on age order. Sometimes it's based on, who was the local, and sometimes it's just family patterns. So some people, some siblings live in a place of fear, right? They live in a place of constant worry. What are we going to do when? What are we going to do when, dad can't stay by himself anymore and you live out of state and I'm going to be the one that's going to be here? What are we going to do when the money runs out and we can't afford to have the aide come and stay overnight? Are you going to come and stay overnight? What are we going to do when, I can't take more time away from work? And so we can probably think about ourselves and we can think about our siblings. And, I will say my sister goes to fear all the time. My mom, thank goodness, is really amazingly healthy for an 86-year-old woman right now. But we regularly have this conversation of, what are we going to do when something happens? And I say, well, Cheryl, today is good. We both talk to her. She's in good shape. She's happy. But what happens when she gets sick? Well, but we don't know that she's going to get sick. Well, but she could fall. Yes, she could fall. well, what are we going to do? Well, we'll see in that moment, but I want to know now, right? And so fear is something, that can cause a lot of conflict because we don't have good answers. For me, I live in a place where I am more of the, appease. I'm sort of the, Cheryl, we'll deal with it. I'll come if I need to come. Mom has money put aside for care, which not every person is able to do. I recognize that, but we're very lucky in this situation. So, I'm always in that role of, trying to calm. But her answer is, well, that's easy for you to say. You're not the one who's here, right? You don't live with that sense of angst. And she's right, I don't. I live 500 miles away. And I need to acknowledge that. I need to acknowledge that I don't live in her skin. I don't lay awake at night and worry the way she does. I acknowledge that's where she is. Fight. There's a lot of fighting that can go on. There can be a lot of fighting going on because Kevin knows something, but his siblings don't, right? They're secret keeping. Some siblings get told about the finances and others don't. Some of you might be a healthcare power of attorney, but your siblings don't know that you're the healthcare power of attorney. I would encourage anybody who is a healthcare power of attorney to ensure that your siblings know that you are. Better now than at 3:00 in the morning in the emergency room. So, this idea of fight, of always trying to be, whether it's in competition or it is saying, no, that's not the right way to do it, or why did you make that decision, or coming up upon Thanksgiving and other holidays where families might be coming together and why didn't you tell me that this has happened? Why didn't you tell me that she was doing so badly? If you would have let me know, I could have done something about it. Now you probably fought a lot as kids also, right? Or that sibling might have been the one that was often the one that was maybe instigator might not be the most gracious word, but the one who would start. And that's going to be a pattern. So when we're scared, when we don't quite understand what's going on, when we don't have control of situations, if our natural inclination is to fight, I probably don't want to fight with my adult parent because I'm feeling, protective. And so who do I turn on? I turn on my sibling. And that's where we often see a lot of this conflict happening. As a social worker, I can tell you over my 30 years of working at hospice, the holidays were when we would get the greatest number of calls about family conflict. Can somebody come to the house? Because family has arrived from out of town or family is visiting. They're all sitting around the table together. And what we thought was going to be a very lovely, gracious, calm meal deteriorates into, what are you talking about? I didn't know about that test result. I didn't know that you changed the bank account. I didn't know that you got the passwords. Right? And so the fighting can begin there. Some of us rise and fight along with, and some of us pull back. Any family patterns that anybody wants to share? Are you guys fighters, fear?
I'm a fighter.
Okay, Kevin is a fighter. Just want to make sure people can hear.
And my partner is a flighter.
Okay.
So she wants to go the other direction, whereas I kind of want to get in the middle.
Right. So that's when there's we could say you're complementary, or we could say that, you're kind of left alone, right? So if one person is a fighter, you are going to go, I am going to solve this. We are going to talk about it. We are going to work on it. We are going to do it. And your partner is saying, okay, let me know when it's over. And then what happens? You feel abandoned. You are angry, not only now at the situation, but now you're feeling like you don't have somebody standing with you. And that raises, that keeps the cycle going. And then the person who is the flight person is the la, 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 la. You're like, I can't deal with this. And probably we could think back to childhood patterns, and there are probably reasons why somebody has developed that behavior of, I'm just going to remove myself from this situation. I'm going to just let it play out the way it's going to play out. And I'm going to, rely on you to do the fight. Or I think that's terrible that you're pushing, and I'm not going to show you by support, even by standing by. I don't know which it is, and it can be a little bit of both, but that's hard.
And my only sibling is an appeaser. And we have one mom, one parent, my mom, is who we're focused around attention. So it makes for some interesting dynamics.
Right. And, that's not uncommon. So in the same family, so we've got mom. Is mom able to make her own decisions at this point?
Some, less as we go along.
And there's often differing opinions about how many decisions can mom make, right? I went through that with my father. I thought he was far less capable of making decisions and understanding than my mother and my sister. And they kept, he's fine to be left alone. I was like, nah, I don't think so. But so you've described in a family, we have parent who has declining capacity to manage her own affairs, make her own decisions. We have you who's the fighter. And then your partner who is okay, I'll be over here, call me when it's over. And then your sibling is the appeaser, whatever you want, Kevin. Just take care of it and just, keep me out of it. Let me know what I need to know. And on one hand, we could say that's kind of cool for you as the fighter, right? You get to, but the appeaser sometimes can come back and say, you did what? I don't think that was really such a great idea. But yet in the moment, the appeaser wasn't willing to, speak their piece. But maybe comes back a little bit later and says, I can't believe you acted like that. I can't believe you did that. I didn't really agree with it, but I didn't want to get right. So there's all of it. And I bet that that's a pattern that's not new to being an adult. Yeah. Either anybody else want to?
I think there's another one, and I think it ends up in being bad feelings, maybe fight. But as you said, sometimes one of the siblings takes all the responsibility, and the rest of the siblings are comfortable with that decision. However, they do have thoughts and feelings. They're just not expressing them.
Right.
And the person who's doing everything may be doing it because they really like being the care provider, but they have some resentment actually.
Right.
Right. So that's a little bit different dynamic.
Right. And I think that, there are all, nuances. We could take this list and expand it, and we could dig deeper into, why is the person who takes charge, are they taking charge because they believe that they are the only one who is competent and capable of doing it? Is it because they feel they can't trust or rely on? Sometimes we've had experiences, I don't think that you came through in the past, so I can't rely on you now. Or maybe I've just been disappointed by other people in my life, and I can't trust that you say you'll help and I just can't believe that you will. Or I feel the need for the, some people are the victims, some people are the heroes, some people are the we could change this list and make it with a different group of words. But it is true that oftentimes in a family, we see one sibling who is perhaps the lead. And what is interesting to explore is, are there places for other siblings to do something? And what is that? I might not be in a position to go and stay and provide care, but am I able to manage the bank account? Am I able to take something off of your plate? Now, some siblings don't want something taken off of their plate, again, because they feel that they have to do it. They promised their parent they would do it. They've always been the responsible. They're the oldest child. Sometimes we have these long-standing patterns that we believe we need to keep repeating. But we can also be creative. There are many things that can be done. I once, when my mom was talking about wanting yarn, I did get online and I ordered her, the 6 different colors of yarn that she said she wanted. And my sister said, I can't believe you did that. You did follow through. And that was very telling to me, is that, she's somebody who feels like she has to be the one. And I respect that, but I have some capacity also. And, sometimes with a very long illness, if we have a long, slow decline with a dementia or a Parkinson's or some other illnesses, sometimes, a parent might stay closer to one child and then move to be with another, or the other sibling can come in and help out. Creativity can become helpful. And sometimes we need an outside party to help us. We're not able to figure it out, just us. And that's where we might seek some assistance, whether it's from a geriatric case manager or, some other kind of counseling, even starting an estate planning process if our parent has not done that and they have the capacity. Anything that can begin these conversations so that we're working, again, towards the same goal, because we tend to fall into our same patterns. And it can be very destructive, and it can be very, just sad as our loved one declines. As our loved one declines and needs increasing care, we want to try to, number one, keep the focus on that loved one. But I often think about, what will my relationship be like with my sibling after my last parent dies, right? A lot of what I do, I think my appeasing behavior, is because I want to have a relationship with my sibling after my mother dies, right? Because after both parents have died, who are we as siblings then? It's just us. And sometimes we talk about that we want to try to stay as close as we can, because one day it's going to just be us. And if we have burned so many bridges and have so much anger and we don't trust, then we're not going to have a relationship. And that cuts away another part of the family, even after the parent has died. And so, when we think about how we interact with our siblings, probably because I worked as a bereavement counselor for many years, the thought of how it is that we can own what our behaviors are, and we can invite in others perhaps to work with us so that we can come to a place of some agreement and some greater comfort with what is going on. I'm not saying it will be easy, but ultimately, we're still going to be siblings after our parents die. That's, of course, sometimes other unexpected deaths occur, but the natural process is the siblings are the remaining ones after the parent. And I often think about that in terms of lasting, ongoing relationship. So if we look at the next slide, and I want to pause and see, are there any questions or comments? Anything with your situation?
No, but you raised a lot of good points. I'm actually the oldest one, and I live right near my parents. And sometimes I think there are conversations that are directed because I am the oldest one. And I do care for my parents generally every day.
Wow. And and I'm not asking to put you on the spot or even for you to necessarily answer, but so you're the oldest child, you provide almost daily care, you care, emotionally and physically, and then you have siblings that are not as present, it sounds like. And if we had a conversation with your siblings, would the conversation be, she is wonderful and amazing and makes everything so much easier for us? Would it be, she just controls everything and, doesn't let us in? Is it, and do we ever talk about what does it mean that you are doing that? And, do we get acknowledgement, appreciation? Maybe they assist with the finances to help out with care. Every situation is so different.
That's very true.
And it can evolve, right? And certainly these years of the pandemic when travel has been even more difficult, sometimes that's an excuse. And sometimes, it's a reality. It's been hard to get places and care has been challenging. Yeah. Anything online? So I often think about what do we do, right? As we think about our time coming to a close for this evening and say, okay, we can acknowledge everything that we've talked about. We can acknowledge that it can be challenging to have conversation. It can be challenging to go past our traditional patterns in our family. It can be difficult if you're the one who feels like they do everything. And how do we ask for help? Are we comfortable asking for help? What's the response? Have we stopped even trying because we think we know that we won't get that help? And that's all distress, right? I think of it in terms of moral distress. I think of it in terms of, I lie awake at night and I am troubled. And so what is it that we can do? And just some, thoughts. Number one is taking care of yourself. It is, on some level, it sounds trite, but when we are the caregiver, when we are the person who is in the trenches, we need to be able to take care of ourselves. We need to know who our resources are. We need to know who our support people are. If it is not our siblings, we need to know who our person is. Who is it that we can go to for a hug, for affirmation, for talking through a confidential situation? Whether we journal, whether we exercise, whether we, do primal scream in the shower. Truly, we need to be able to take care of ourselves. I don't think that You know, having an aging parent means that we need to sacrifice ourselves. And all too often we see at least one sibling in a family who is just ragged beyond belief, and not able even to conceive of what we can do to try to lift the load a little bit. So taking care of ourselves, whether that's reaching out within your siblings or acknowledging there are limitations of what is going to be possible and seeking assistance elsewhere, support elsewhere. This is the perfect venue, and people who understand. It's isolating when you are in it, and to be able to say, oh my gosh, you also, right? There's something just relieving about that. So taking care of ourselves. And then when we think about taking care of each other, having a sense of grace for the experience of what your sibling may be going through. Many siblings don't communicate openly. I don't truly know what my sister's experience is. I can fill in the blanks, but I want to offer grace where I can. I want to be available to her in whatever way that I can be. And I also want to take care of others in my friend group where I can be perhaps more effective. I might not be as effective in helping to care for my mother, but there are many others that I can help. And so I can feel affirmed. I can be worthy, even if it's not my mother that I'm helping to care for, but being, you know, able to care for others, care about others, be the listener for somebody is very powerful. Then when we think about, you know, really trying to look at what our resources are and make use of what's available. Again, the sense of isolation, I have to do it by myself, I'm in it alone. We want to be able to reach out and make use of resources, make use of this group, make use of other people who attend, community resources, maybe through our faith, maybe through other organizations. We want to be able to have outlets. You know, I call it escaping in place. We want to be able to have that safe place to go. And if we know about them before the crisis, all the better. It's not being selfish. It's being realistic that we all need to be able to step away at times and then step back towards. There's something very wonderful about being of community. We create, you know, we often talk about family by blood and family by choice. And sometimes we have to find those people that we can take along with us. Because otherwise it can be so overwhelming to constantly feel like you're in the midst of a battle, that you're in the midst of this fight day in and day out. And it is true, our loved one, our parent, deserves care, but it doesn't always have to be us, although it feels like it sometimes, right? And what can we do to try to invite others in? And what can we do also to feel productive in our community and be of the community and have some, you know, areas where we thrive and gravitate what's important to us? You know, when did you get to read a book that you wanted to read? I'm guessing it's been a long time, right? And so when we think about moral distress, when we think about the sense of care, sense of obligation sometimes, sense of angst, sense of anger, what do we do with it? And so I think that if we don't feel that we can, I don't know if make progress is the right word with our siblings, but if we feel like, you know, our relationships are fixed, our interactions are fixed, but yet we still have our loved one to care for, what can we do to soften the edges? What can we do to try to anticipate needs? Who else can we invite in? Is there an intermediary that can be helpful? Is it the middle child? Is it, you know, is it the partner, the spouse, the adult grandchild? You know, are there other people that can help us navigate this and not feel so burdened by what is going on? And if we look at the last slide, I use this often when I think about, you know, Leonard Cohen, number one, has a number of recordings. He has since died, but Hallelujah is one song. But this comes from another song, and it says, ring the bells that can still ring, forget the perfect offering. There is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. The reality is every family is imperfect. Every day is not going to go the way we want, but there is a glimmer of light that comes in, and the sun is going to rise every morning, and it's going to set every night. And we have another opportunity to take a deep breath and to try to find that place of peace where we can live with ourselves, we can feel satisfied with what we are offering, and we can accept the reality of our siblings and how they are experiencing what is occurring with our parents. We share the parent, but we are still an individual. And so I share that with you as a hope that we are able to find those glimmers of light and hope in the midst of what can feel like deep, dark days and difficult times. So, thank you.
And now you know why Risa Hanau is my favorite speaker. We talk often in ACAP about gathering information and resources and ways, techniques, strategies. But what Risa's brought to us is an awareness and a permission to see how complex our relationships are as we try to provide that care for our parents. And also wonderful ideas that we can explore for dealing with that complexity and going forward with the care. Thank you again, Risa. That was beautiful. There was so much tonight that it reminds me to remind you that you can watch this talk again. And let me just tell you a little bit about the ways that you can access ACAP in general and the recordings of our programs. First of all, go on Facebook and like us at ACAP Guilford County. You can also visit our website at acapcommunity.org, and while you're there, sign up so that you're on our email list. And as I said, you can also view programs by going to YouTube and searching for the ACAP Community channel. I want to thank Risa again, and I also want to thank our very generous and devoted sponsors, Griswold Home Care, Health Team Advantage, Booth Harrington and Johns, and Providence Place. We truly appreciate your support. We'll be coming back together again in January. Sign up for the email so that you get notice about that. And thank you all for being here tonight.